My family skipped my wedding, calling it a trivial event for someone at the bottom, and told me not to bother them about it. While I was starting my new life, my mom was posting videos from a Hawaii vacation with my brother and his family. It was clear they had time for everything except me. Then a month later, they suddenly called in a panic. The loan payments haven't been made, they said, so I calmly replied, "Don't contact me about trivial matters." The morning of my wedding, I stood alone in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror, my fingers trembling as I traced the lace of a gown my mother had never seen. The silence in the room was heavy, not with peace, but with the deafening echo of the seats that would remain empty in just a few hours. I had spent 29 years convinced that if I just worked a little harder, cared a little more, and achieved a little more, I would finally be enough to earn a seat at the table of my parents' hearts. But as the sun rose over Grand Rapids, illuminating the delicate beadwork of my dress, the brutal reality finally settled in. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a footnote in the story of my brother's success. Growing up in the shadow of Thomas was like trying to grow a garden in a cellar. My parents, Diana and Richard, didn't just prefer him, they worshipped the idea of him. Thomas was the golden child, the corporate prince who followed our father's every footstep into the world of high-stakes business. Every time he breathed, it seemed, they threw a parade. When he graduated from a prestigious university and landed a Fortune 500 job, my parents looked at him with a pride so fierce it was almost blinding. When he married Grace, a woman whose chief virtue in my mother's eyes was a father who golfed with the governor, it was as if the Parker family had finally ascended to the throne they believed they deserved. I was the daughter who settled. That was my father's favorite word for me. I chose nursing because I wanted to touch lives, to be the person holding a hand in the dark, to make a tangible, human difference. To my father, that was just changing bedpans. He saw my passion as a waste of potential, a rejection of the corporate glory he envisioned for his bloodline. My mother was quieter in her disdain, but her sighs were sharper than any shout. "It's a respectable job, I suppose," she'd say, her voice trailing off as she looked through me, already thinking about Thomas's latest promotion. The disparity was stitched into the fabric of our lives. For Thomas's 20th birthday, a shiny new car sat in the driveway with a bow. For mine, I was handed a department store gift card like a distant acquaintance. When I graduated with honors from nursing school, a feat of grueling study and sleepless nights, my parents checked their watches during the ceremony. They left before I could even take a photo in my cap and gown because there was a neighborhood barbecue they simply couldn't miss. I stood on that lawn, degree in hand, watching their car pull away, and told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that family was unconditional, and eventually, they would see me. 3 years ago, I thought that moment had finally come. My parents called me, not with a dismissive sigh, but with a plea. They had made disastrous investment decisions, and the bank was breathing down their necks, threatening to take the house I grew up in. They needed $25,000 immediately. They had gone to Thomas first, of course. But Thomas, with his private school tuitions, his vacation homes, and his important lifestyle, couldn't help. I had been saving every penny for years, building a nest egg with my partner, Ethan, so we could one day have a home of our own. When I told Ethan about the situation, he didn't hesitate. "They're your parents, Autumn," he said, his gentle teacher's heart leading the way. "If we can help, we should." I transferred the money, every cent of our future, into their account. My mother cried, promising to pay me back $600 a month. I insisted on a written contract, which offended my father's honor, but we signed it. For 3 years, they were perfect. The money arrived like clockwork, and for the first time in my life, my father called just to talk. I felt like I had finally bought my way into their love. Then came Ethan. Ethan is a kindergarten teacher, a man of infinite patience, kindness, and soul. To me, he is everything. To my parents, he was another disappointment. "Hey, teacher?" my mother had asked, her lip curling as if I'd told her he was a professional vagrant. "Your brother married into the Wilson family, Autumn. Do you know who Grace's father is?" I didn't care about Grace's father. I cared about the man who proposed to me in the pediatric ward where I worked, surrounded by the children I cared for, with hand-drawn signs and tearful nurses cheering us on. It wasn't the Ritz-Carlton, where Thomas had proposed with a string quartet, but it was real. As the wedding planning began, the chasm between my reality and my parents' expectations became a canyon. My mother skipped dress shopping for Bridge Club. She compared my elegant, modest A-line gown to Grace's designer original. My father treated the entire event as a nuisance. "It's not like you're merging family businesses," he grumbled. "All this fuss for a nurse and a teacher." The breaking point didn't come with a shout, but with a casual mention of a vacation. 3 months before the big day, my mother mentioned they were finalizing a trip to Hawaii with Thomas and his family. My heart stopped. "But that's my wedding weekend," I whispered. "Is it?" she replied, her voice airy and unbothered. Oh dear, I must have confused the dates. But Thomas has already cleared his schedule, and the grandkids are so excited. You understand, don't you? I didn't. I called my father, my voice shaking, begging him to explain how a vacation could outrank his daughter's wedding. His response was a cold blade to the chest. "There's no misunderstanding, Autumn. We've invested a lot in this trip. Thomas has business contacts in Hawaii. It's a significant opportunity." "More significant than my wedding?" I asked, the tears finally spilling over. "It's just a trivial event for someone at the bottom," he said, and the line went dead. I collapsed into Ethan's arms that night, the word bottom tattooing itself onto my soul. I was the lowest priority, a trivial life lived by trivial people. But in that darkness, Ethan held me and told me my worth wasn't a paycheck or a title. We decided then and there. The wedding would go on. We would celebrate with the people who actually saw us. The day was beautiful, despite the ache. My father-in-law, Robert, offered to walk me down the aisle, but I chose to walk alone. I needed to prove to myself that I could stand on my own 2 feet, even if the people who brought me into the world refused to stand beside me. I gave Robert and Margaret the seats in the front row, the seats meant for my parents. I danced, I laughed, and I started a new life. But the knife was twisted one more time the next morning. While I was packing for our honeymoon, I saw my mother's Instagram. A video of a sunset beach. "Nothing better than having the whole family together," the caption read. My parents, Thomas, Grace, and the kids were all there, glowing in the Hawaiian sun. I wasn't in the video. I wasn't in the caption. To the world, I didn't exist. We went to Maine for our honeymoon, turning off our phones and letting the Atlantic breeze wash away the toxicity. I began therapy. I began to realize that their failure to love me wasn't my failure to be lovable. I stopped calling. I stopped trying. I focused on my new role at the hospital, developing a patient advocacy program that Barbara, my chief nursing officer, had handpicked me for. I was building a life of substance while my family built a life of mirrors. 6 weeks after the wedding, I noticed something. For 3 years, the $600 loan payment had never been late. But June came and went. Then July. The account remained still. I sent a professional email, then another. Silence. It seemed that now that they had the whole family together in Hawaii, the daughter they left behind, the one who had saved their home, no longer mattered enough to even be repaid. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the contract they had signed so begrudgingly, and realized that the bottom my father spoke of was about to drop out from under them. The silence following the wedding wasn't the peaceful sanctuary I had envisioned. Instead, it felt like the heavy, ionized air before a massive summer storm. While Ethan and I tried to anchor ourselves in the quiet joy of our new marriage, my mother's digital life hummed with a vibrant, cruel energy. Every time I accidentally caught a glimpse of her social media, it was a curated gallery of my exclusion. There they were, the whole family, at sun-drenched dinners in Honolulu or weekend brunches back home. My brother Thomas, always at the center, radiating the smug confidence of a man who knew he was the favorite. There was no mention of the daughter who had stayed behind, no photos of my wedding, and certainly no mention of the $600 hole in my bank account where their monthly payment used to be. Dr. Bennett, my therapist, became my North Star during those weeks. "You are mourning a living family, Autumn," she told me during one particularly grueling session. "That is often harder than mourning the dead because the rejection is a choice they make every single morning." She taught me that their silence wasn't a reflection of my worth, but a map of their own limitations. Armed with that perspective, Ethan and I turned our gaze forward. We spent our weekends walking through open houses, dreaming of a 3-bedroom bungalow with a yard big enough for a dog and a tire swing. We talked about foster to adopt programs, our hearts aching for children who, like us, understood what it felt like to be the extra person in a room. We'll be the parents who show up, Ethan promised, squeezing my hand as we toured a dusty fixer-upper. To every play, every game, every trivial moment. Especially the trivial ones. Peace is a fragile thing, however, and mine shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when my father's name flashed across my phone screen. My heart did a panicked somersault. For a split second, I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Maybe he was calling to apologize? Maybe the guilt of missing the wedding had finally caught up to him? "Hello," I said, my voice thin. "Autumn," my father began, his tone clipped and efficient, as if he were addressing a junior clerk at his firm. "I'm calling about the deposits. We haven't received anything for the last 2 months. I checked the account this morning, and there's been no activity. Is there a technical issue with your bank?" I froze, the phone feeling suddenly cold against my ear. "Deposits? Dad, I think you have it backward. You owe me money. You've missed June and July's loan payments." There was a pause, a heavy, suffocating beat of silence. Then a scoff. "Loan? Autumn, don't be absurd. That money was a gift. Family helps family. We don't keep a ledger of our love. We're your parents, for heaven's sake." The audacity of it felt like a physical strike. "It wasn't a gift, Dad. We signed a contract. $25,000 isn't a token of affection, it was my entire house down payment. I have the agreement in writing." A technicality he dismissed, his voice rising in irritation. "Look, the situation has changed. Thomas is going through a rough patch with the firm. Business is down, and he's facing some significant overhead. We're helping him stay afloat, and as his sister, you should be doing your part to contribute to the family fund. It's a matter of responsibility." "Responsibility," I repeated, a hot, sharp anger beginning to boil in my chest. "You skipped my wedding for a vacation. You called my life trivial and told me I was at the bottom. You haven't spoken to me in weeks, and now you're calling to demand I give you more money to fund Thomas's lifestyle? To pay for his country club memberships while I work double shifts at the hospital. Don't be dramatic," he snapped. "Thomas has children. He has a status to maintain. You and Ethan, you live simply. You don't have the same needs. I don't care what he needs." I shouted, the force of my own voice startling me. "I care about the money you legally owe me. I am not an ATM for the golden child's failures. If the payments don't resume, I will take action." I hung up, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Within minutes, it was ringing again. My mother. I knew I shouldn't answer, but the old, well-trained urge to defend myself took over. "How dare you speak to your father that way?" she shrieked the moment I picked up. "After everything we've done for you. We raised you, we fed you, we supported your little nursing hobby. It's a career, Mom. A career that paid for your mortgage when you were about to lose the house." "That is different," she cried. "Thomas is suffering. They've had to pull Emma out of her private academy. Grace is devastated. We are all making sacrifices, and here you are, being selfish over a few $100s. You've changed, Autumn. You used to be so sweet, so accommodating. Now you're cold. Is it Ethan? Has he put these ideas in your head?" "No, Mom. I just grew up. I stopped accepting the scraps you threw under the table while Thomas ate the whole meal. Tell Dad he has 14 days to bring the account current, or he'll be hearing from my lawyer." The fallout was immediate and nuclear. I dug the original contract out of my filing cabinet, scanned it, and sent it to their emails with a formal note. The response was a flood of toxicity. My father claimed the contract was signed under duress and wasn't legally binding. My brother, Thomas, sent a rare text that dripped with condescension. "Not cool, sis. You're taking food out of my kids' mouths so you can play house with your teacher boyfriend. Grow up." I stared at the text, then at the photos of Thomas and Grace's $1 million mansion on Zillow. The food he was worried about was likely the organic catering for their next garden party. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with a family. I was dealing with a cult of personality centered entirely around my brother's ego. I sought out Meredith Walsh, a lawyer known for being as sharp as a scalpel. Sitting in her office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and expensive coffee, I felt a strange sense of relief. She looked over the document and laughed quietly. "Duress? They were facing foreclosure, and you gave them a lifeline. That's not duress, Autumn, that's a miracle. The fact that they paid you for 3 years proves they knew exactly what this was alone. She drafted a formal demand letter, a masterpiece of cold, legal precision. It was sent via certified mail, requiring a signature. I knew the moment it arrived because the flying monkeys began to circle. My Aunt Patricia called to tell me my mother was prostrate with grief. My Uncle Gerald sent a rambling email about ingratitude. Even Grace, the sister-in-law who usually looked at me like I was a smudge on her designer shoes, called to needle me. "You're destroying the family reputation, Autumn," Grace hissed over the phone. "People are talking. Do you know how embarrassing it is for Thomas to have a sister who sues her own parents? Maybe it wouldn't be embarrassing if Thomas paid his own bills instead of letting our parents steal from me to cover his obligations," I countered. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder," she snapped. "You're just jealous of what we have. You're small, Autumn. You've always been small. If being big means being a thief and a liar, Grace, then I'll stay down here at the bottom where the air is a lot cleaner." I hung up and blocked her. The 14-day clock was ticking, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the explosion. I was the one holding the match. The silence from my parents wasn't a truce, it was a tactical withdrawal. While I spent my shifts at the hospital finding purpose in the chaos of patient care, my mother was busy curating a digital shrine to a version of our family that didn't include me. She posted grainy throwbacks of Thomas and me as children, captioned with cryptic, bleeding heart quotes about how nothing is more precious than a daughter's love, and how she missed the days when family meant everything. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. To the casual observer, she was the heartbroken matriarch pining for an ungrateful child. To me, she was a woman trying to buy back her reputation with nostalgia because she refused to pay back her debt with currency. Dr. Bennett reminded me that these posts were just another form of shadowboxing. "She's not talking to you, Autumn," she said during our Tuesday session. "She's talking to her audience. She's trying to convince herself and the world that she's the victim so she doesn't have to face the fact that she's a debtor." I took that clarity and used it as a shield. I stopped checking her page. I stopped wondering if the next notification would be an apology. Instead, I focused on the way Ethan looked at me when we finally found the house, a charming 3-bedroom bungalow with a sagging porch and a garden that screamed for revival. "This is it," he whispered, and for the first time, the bottom didn't feel like a place of shame. It felt like a solid, grounded foundation. The breaking point arrived 3 weeks after my lawyer's demand letter landed like a grenade in their mailbox. My father sent a text that lacked his usual corporate polish. "We need to meet. All of us. This has gone far enough." After a long night of deliberation with Ethan and a quick check-in with Meredith, I agreed. But I set the terms. Neutral ground. 1 hour. Ethan by my side. And absolutely no discussion of dropping the legal claim. My father grumbled, but he was cornered. The air in the private room at the Riverside Grill was thick enough to choke on. My parents sat on one side, flanked by Thomas and Grace, who looked like they were attending a funeral for their own social standing. Ethan and I sat opposite them, a united front. My father opened the meeting with a heavy sigh, trying to reclaim the moral high ground. "This lawyer business was unnecessary, Autumn. It's inflammatory. We're family. We should be settling this across a dinner table, not through legal briefs." "I tried the dinner table for 29 years, Dad," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "You used that time to tell me I was trivial. I'm using the lawyer to ensure I'm finally heard." "You need to understand the pressure we're under," Thomas interjected, leaning forward with that familiar air of self-importance. "My company is restructuring. I have temporary cash flow issues. Mom and Dad are just bridging the gap for me." "You're being incredibly short-sighted." Grace chimed in, her voice dripping with practiced disdain. "So you'd rather see your niece and nephew suffer because you're throwing a tantrum over a loan? We're talking about children's lives, Autumn." That was when Ethan, the gentlest man I know, reached his limit. "The only person suffering here is the woman who spent her life savings to keep a roof over your parents' heads while you were buying vacation homes," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your children are in private school. You live in a mansion. You chose Hawaii over your sister's wedding. Your version of suffering is most people's dream of luxury. Don't you dare lecture her on sacrifice." The room went white-hot with silence. My father's face turned a bruised purple. "You have no right, he has every right," I snapped. "He's the family that shows up. Now, are we going to discuss the $25,000, or should I let Meredith proceed with the filing? Then, something unexpected happened. Thomas looked at me, then at our parents, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Wait, what $25,000? I thought you guys got a home equity loan to cover the mortgage back then. I felt the blood drain from my face. They told you they got a bank loan? Thomas, they told me you couldn't help them because of your private school expenses. I gave them my entire house down payment 3 years ago to stop the foreclosure. The silence that followed was different. It was the sound of a deck of cards collapsing. Thomas turned to my parents, his expression shifting from arrogance to a raw, ugly realization. You never told me you borrowed from Autumn. You told me the bank handled it. And now you're using the money you owe her, a nurse's salary, to help me cover my cash flow issues. My mother withered in her chair, clutching her pearls as if they could provide oxygen. We didn't want to worry you, Thomas. You had so much on your plate with the kids. So you stole from one child to subsidize the ego of the other? Thomas shook his head, looking at them as if he were seeing them for the first time. I would never have taken a dime from you if I knew it was her money. This is sick. In that moment, the golden child myth shattered. For the first time in my life, my brother wasn't my rival. He was a witness to the same dysfunction that had nearly drowned me. The meeting ended not with a hug, but with a cold, written agreement. My father, his pride lying in tatters on the restaurant carpet, agreed to resume the original schedule and pay back the arrears within 60 days. The months that followed were a blur of quiet victories. The money began hitting my account again, but we didn't use it for the house. Instead, Ethan and I established a small scholarship fund for nursing students who specialized in patient advocacy, a way to turn that tainted money into a legacy of genuine care. We moved into our bungalow, painting the walls in shades of sage and cream, filling the rooms with sunlight and the sound of records playing in the evening. Thomas reached out a few weeks later. We met for coffee, just the two of us. It was awkward, but he was trying. I never questioned why I always got more, he admitted, staring into his mug. I just thought that's how the world worked. I'm sorry, Autumn. For the wedding, for the money, for all of it. I didn't offer him instant forgiveness. Some wounds are too deep for a single cup of coffee, but I offered him a seat at my table. A real seat where no one was ranked. When I found out I was pregnant 6 months later, the joy was tempered by a new resolve. I sat my parents down and laid out the new world order. You can be grandparents, I told them, but the hierarchy ends here. My child will never be compared to Thomas's kids. They will never be told their dreams are trivial. If you can't love them unconditionally, you won't love them at all. My mother cried, real tears this time, I think, and promised to do better. When our daughter, Lily, was born, she was greeted by a village of people who chose her. Ethan's parents, who treated me like their own blood, Riley, who became the godmother every child deserves, and my colleagues from the hospital, who brought casseroles and wisdom in equal measure. My parents visit occasionally, and they are respectful, though a bit distant. The warmth isn't fully there, but the boundaries are. I've learned that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build, brick by painful brick. I'm no longer at the bottom of anything. I'm at the center of a life I created, holding a daughter who will never have to wonder if she is enough. She will grow up knowing that her worth isn't measured in business degrees or social standing, but in the kindness she shows and the boundaries she keeps. I broke the cycle, and in the quiet of our new home, I finally realized that the only person who ever needed to recognize my value was me.